Okay, so we will get started. So I'm just going over some tips and tricks for at-home workouts. Again, if you have any questions as we're going, you can just put them in the chat box and Matt will kind of moderate those as we're going through. So we're basically going to start with some basic education on workout principles and then go through some exercises and some progressions. Okay, so a little bit about me. So like I said, I'm a physiotherapist that works at our downtown core or the Edward Street location. So I did my Bachelor of Science in Kin at Western, and then I did my Master of Science in Physical Therapy at U of T. So my favorite ways to stay active, obviously love hiking when we're able to get outside a little bit more. I enjoy running, trying out different workout classes in Toronto, and I've actually been doing at-home workouts for a while. So this is kind of a workout style that I have enjoyed doing for the last couple of years, but that seems to be sort of the main way we're getting our workouts in these days. So where do I start? So a lot of you that have been used to either going to classes or doing workouts at the gym, when you're trying to switch to kind of this home workout style that we've all been kind of forced into these days, if you do a quick Google search, YouTube, Instagram, there's so much content out there right now that it can be a little bit overwhelming. So millions of results come up if you sort of type home workout into Google. And if you're not used to working out like this, or even if you are, it's just a little bit overwhelming to kind of know what workout is right for you and what's a good website, what's a good trainer. So we're going to go through some stuff to kind of help you figure that out today. So in terms of sort of the best home workout to do during quarantine, so I thought this quote was pretty fitting for that. So there's really no right answer except to play and experiment. So I'm not here to tell you that sort of one specific workout style is best. It's going to be different for every person depending on your level of activity, if you have any injuries or anything that you're trying to avoid flaring up. But basically, I'm just encouraging you to get that movement in, find ways to get that workout in while you're at home, but doing it sort of in a safe manner where you're not aggravating those injuries and making sure that you're really emphasizing proper form. So that's kind of my big emphasis for today. So we're going to start with just some general workout principles. So you want to make sure you're always starting with a warm-up and finishing with a cool down. So in terms of the warm-up, you want to be doing things that are dynamic. So a lot of times people sort of question whether to stretch before or after the exercise. So it's totally fine to stretch before, but you want to do it dynamically. So what this means is that you're not kind of getting to that end range of your movement and then holding it there. You want to sort of pulse through that movement or do some more swinging motion. So like swinging your legs side to side or up in front of you. You want to focus on the muscle groups or the body parts that you're going to be working on during the actual workout. So if it's more of a leg focused activity, you want to be stretching out those legs, getting them through those ranges of motion, and just getting them warmed up for the activity. And you should be aiming for about 5 to 10 minutes of warm-up time. And then after your workout, a cool down, I'm not as picky with that one. So it can be similar to the warm-up in that it's dynamic and you're flowing through the motions. Or this one can be more of a static stretch. So that's more of the bringing your body part to that end range. So like a forward fold where you're trying to touch your toes and holding in that position for 30 seconds. That would be more of a static stretch. So that's totally fine for the cool down. Again, you just want to focus on the muscle groups or body parts that you just worked on during your exercise and aiming for 5 to 10 minutes for this as well. In terms of types of exercise, so there's 4 main categories. So we'll start with aerobic. So this is kind of your running, your cycling, your swimming, stuff like that you would think of, where you're really getting your heart rate up through a repetitive motion. So in terms of the at-home stuff, unless you have a treadmill or something in your home, this might look more like jumping jacks, high knees, burpees, something where you're doing a motion over and over again to get that heart rate up. And working through those motions. So the second would be strength training. So again, if you think of it kind of in a gym perspective, this is the weightlifting, trying to lift some heavier loads. But when you translate that into a home environment, that can totally be just body weight stuff. So push-ups, squats, Anything where you're doing things a little bit slower, but you're taking your body through different ranges of motion and putting some load through your joints. And the last two are flexibility and balance. So flexibility is going through some end ranges of motion. So you can see in the picture here, she's kind of taking her hamstrings through that full range of motion, and either holding or kind of pulsing through that position. So more of that yoga thought process. And then balance can be anything from working on single leg stance, single leg activities, doing things on an uneven surface, or doing things with your eyes closed. So anything that's kind of challenging your balance in terms of exercise. So the goal for me, especially when you're doing stuff at home and you're trying to sort of squeeze your movement into one package time, it's really good to try to incorporate all four of these components into whatever exercise or workout you're doing. So just keep that in mind as you're going. And then some subcategories here. So we've got high impact versus low impact. So in terms of the high impact, this would be something where both feet are leaving the ground at the same time. So again, if we're talking more about outside stuff, running is something that is a high impact activity. More of the at-home stuff, that would be, again, like your burpees, your squat jumps, your jumping jacks, anything where you're fully leaving the ground and coming back down. So the pros of this, it does tend to increase your aerobic demand because you're doing more of that repetitive motion. But the cons, it increases your load through your body parts and your joints. And if this isn't something that you're used to, it can increase your risk of injury or can aggravate a previous injury that you might have. So kind of the opposite of that is a low impact exercise. So this just simply means when your contact with the ground is maintained. So something like a squat or a push-up where you're never leaving the ground. The pros of this is it's easier to control the movement. So you're able to kind of think about it a little bit more when you're going through that whole range of motion and make sure you have a little bit more control, which decreases your risk of injury. But some of the cons is that people often find that this has a decreased aerobic demand. So you might leave this workout feeling like you didn't really get your heart rate up or you didn't burn the sweat that you wanted to. But that shouldn't be the case. There's alternatives to kind of work around that high impact, low impact trade-off. So common types of home workout videos. So based on what we've just touched on, they tend to be a mix of that aerobic and strength training component. And they're often high repetitions with low load. So for any of you guys that have done some home workout videos, things like 50 burpees in a minute where you're trying to rush through the movements to kind of hit a certain amount of reps in a time frame. This is super common in home workout videos because they are trying to get your heart rate up and get that sweat going. So if you're doing this with movements that you're not super comfortable with, or you're just really focusing on getting sort of that time crunch in, it can lead to poor form and technique. And then again, there's tons of high impact in a lot of these home workout videos. So lots of the burpees, jumping jacks, high knees, squat jumps, which again, if this isn't something that you're used to, it can aggravate some areas of aches and pains. So kind of why we started thinking about doing this topic was because I was noticing it even in myself. So I'm fairly active, but this is a bit of a switch in my typical routine. So I have kind of a nagging foot injury that I've been neglecting for a while now. And probably within the first week of switching to home workouts, I was noticing that it was flaring up a lot because I just wasn't thinking about it. And I was trying to do all of these sort of jumping activities way more often than I was before. So how can I progress my workouts at home? So tons of options here. If you have resistance bands, these are a great way to increase the load throughout your entire range of motion. So as you pull harder onto those bands, that tension is going to increase, which allows you to maintain that load throughout the whole range. And you can also use bands to increase the activation of certain muscles depending on where they're placed in the activity. And it's really easy to alter the sort of amount of progression by how tight you tie the band or how much tension you put through the band. And if you have multiple of them at home, if you feel like you need a little bit more load, you can even double up on your bands. And then free weights is, again, a really simple way to increase the load. Doesn't have to be a dumbbell like you would picture at the gym. You can use anything you have laying around the house. So a lot of people have been using wine bottles or soup cans, stuff like that. Another really good way to do it is if you have like a little like grocery bag, Lululemon bag, something like that, putting like books in it or weights, like potatoes, the soup cans into the bag, anything like that that you can find at home, to kind of help you play around with how much weight you have in that bag and how much weight you're putting through your body. Another good thing with the weights is it increases the demand for your core stabilization. So as soon as you're placing load somewhere that's sort of away from your body, your core automatically has to fire a little bit more to keep you nice and stable. Again, you can play around with the tempo. So no equipment needed for this. You can just play around with the timing of your movement. So if you add sort of a pulse at the end range or a hold at the end range, that automatically is going to increase the difficulty of the exercise and increase the amount of activation in those muscles. So it's a simple, very easy, but really effective way to increase the intensity of that exercise. And then your body positioning. So you can alter your body positioning to kind of increase or decrease the difficulty. Probably one of the easiest ones to think about is a push-up. So with your knees on the floor versus doing it from your feet, you can sort of imagine how much that changes the difficulty of the exercise with just a simple change in your body position. And then high impact, which we've touched on a little bit. So this does increase the difficulty of the exercise, but you always want to make sure that you are fully comfortable and confident with the low impact version of the movement before you're increasing to the high impact version of that exercise. And then really any combination of the above. So if you feel like you're still not getting that burn, just put some of these progressions together. So if you have a band at home, you can throw the band on to whatever the exercise is and add a pulse to it or add a hold at the end range, or holding weights and adding a high impact jump to that movement to sort of double up on that progression. So in terms of how do you know when it's time to progress the exercise, so kind of with the low impact to high impact stuff, you always want to feel confident and pain-free in your current level of the exercise. So if you're doing something like a squat and you're getting back pain or knee pain, you don't want to be adding weights to this, or you don't want to be adding that jump squat component to it until you've talk to your physio or modified it a little bit so that you're not getting that pain and then trying to add even more load to that movement. If you're feeling confident and pain-free, I like to always recommend just performing your usual sets and reps, but on your last set, try to continue until fatigue. So for example, if you are typically doing 3 sets of 10, on your 3rd set, keep going. If you fatigue right around that 10 reps, then you're at the right level of difficulty. If you can blow right past the 10 reps, you're not even feeling tired yet, you obviously need to progress it. But if you are struggling to reach that 10 reps in your sort of last set of the exercise and you're losing your form, then it's more likely that you need to regress the exercise. Okay. Any questions about that stuff? Matt, we're good?
Yeah, no questions just yet.
Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some actual exercises. So if you guys want, you can kind of join in with this stuff as we're going. So I have some videos in here and we're going to talk about some forms. So I think it'll be helpful if you guys kind of work through the exercises as we talk about them. If you're someone that just wants to watch for now, that's totally fine. We are recording this webinar and we're going to have the videos and stuff posted afterwards on Instagram. So you can always look back on them later. Okay, so we're going to start with a squat. So if everyone wants to sort of get into this standing squat position, so I'm going to put the video here. You guys should all be able to see this, but you want your feet about hip width apart. You can turn your feet out to the side a little bit if you want, but it's not necessary to do so. You want to try to maintain a neutral spine the whole time. So you're trying to avoid that real arch in your back as you come down. You want to focus on moving down and not backwards. A good way to try to think of this is keeping your shin and chest angle equal. So if you look at these pictures here, you can see on the left, the angle of the chest is pretty equal to the angle of the shin, whereas in this picture, the body is leaned forward a little bit too much, and that's when you get some of those errors in form, is when that doesn't match up with the angle of your shin. So that's a good kind of cue to think about. Another one to think about is that your knees can go past your toes. So this is kind of a common misconception with squats, is that you have to keep your knees behind your toes the whole time. So this is something that's sometimes told to people that have knee pain because it tries to take some of the load off of the knees. But it's totally fine to have them go past your toes a little bit. It actually helps you with your form and helps you get a little bit lower into the squat. If you find that when you try this, it does give you knee pain, feel free to reach out to one of us and we can talk you through some modifications on how to work through that. Another good one to think about is keeping your heels on the ground. So this is people that have had ankle sprains in the past or have some stiff ankles. Sometimes they find it difficult to kind of get all the way through that range of motion without lifting their heels. A way that you can modify that is just putting like a little thin like book or something like that underneath your heels to kind of lift your heels up a little bit. It almost helps you kind of cheat that range of motion so that there's not as much movement coming through the ankles, but you're still able to get through that squat. And then you want your knees to track over your toes. So that just means that they're not kind of caving in towards the middle as you come through that movement. Sound good? Okay, so if you are feeling comfortable with your squat form, this is where those progressions come in. So we're going to kind of follow the order that we went through earlier on in the presentation. So you can add a band like I have here around your thighs or around your feet. So both of these positions activate the amount of glute work that is being done. So a lot of people place it around their thighs, but actually when you place it around your feet, it's been shown to increase the activation of your glutes a little bit more. So that's something that you can try out at home, is putting that band around your feet for some more activation of those glutes. And then if you don't have a band, you can use weights just held at shoulder height to increase the amount of load you're putting through that squat. Again, you just want to think about maintaining that form as you go through with the weights. And you can do this with 2 weights or 1 weight, it doesn't matter too much, just holding it sort of at chest height. Again, you can add the pulse at the end range to increase the difficulty. And then playing around with your stance. So that's sort of my normal squat there. If I take my feet a little bit wider, that increases the difficulty for the muscles on my inner thighs. And then if I come a little bit more narrow, that increases the load through my quads. And then last but not least, we have the jump squat. So again, I would leave the jump squat to sort of your last progression. Once you're comfortable with all these other movements, then you can progress to that higher impact form of the activity. Okay, so next up we have the lunge. So with this one, on your front leg, you want to have your hip, knee, and ankle in line. So you want to think about that knee not caving in towards the midline. So if you have a mirror or something at home that you can watch yourself do these, it makes it a little bit easier to see that angle. So you can see it from the front view here. So I'm keeping that hip, knee, and ankle in line as I come down. Again, same thing as your squat, that front knee can go past your toes. You don't need to keep it sort of far back behind your toes. And your back leg doesn't need to touch the ground. So it's actually a little bit better if you can control that movement all the way down instead of sort of bouncing off the ground every time you go through these. You want your chest lean forward slightly. You don't need to be perfectly upright when you're doing this. And you want to feel majority of the work in your front leg. So I prefer doing lunges stepping backwards into them instead of stepping forwards, because that kind of biases the load a little bit more through that front leg, which is where we want to feel it. So moving on to the progression. So this is one that's a progression, but it also tends to help if people are getting knee pain in that front leg when they're doing lunges. So sometimes the progressions can actually be helpful to reduce some of that pain. So I'm basically getting the band to pull my leg towards the midline, and I'm having to use this hip and this glute to keep that knee nice and straight as I come down. And you can also sort of replicate this at home with weights. So you can hold them on both sides, or to mimic that band, you can just hold the weight on the same side as your back leg. So if you think about it, the weight is also kind of trying to pull me towards the midline, and I'm using this outer side of my front leg to keep me nice and upright. So those are some modifications there. Again, just a pulsing at end range to increase the difficulty, and then playing around with the body positioning. So A curtsy lunge is when you come out to the side with your back leg. So you want to try to think about keeping your hips pointed straight ahead as much as you can. Again, if this is something that aggravates your knee when you're doing this, I would leave these ones out for now. But if these are feeling fine, they're great because they increase the work of that glute on the outside of this front hip again. So that's a way to play around with your body positioning. And then a second way to do that is having your front or your back leg, elevated on something. So, sorry, it gets cut off a little bit here, but it's basically putting even more of that load through the front leg and increasing the activation of that quad even more. And then last but not least, again, once you're comfortable with everything else, we have those jump lunges. Good, okay. So next up, we have the glute bridge. So this is a great exercise for people who have back pain, but you just want to make sure that you're doing it properly. So a good way to think about this, you want to exhale as you lift up. So exhale can activate your core as if someone was about to punch you in the stomach. You want to have that active core and then lifting up towards the ceiling. You want to think about your axis of the movement being through your hip and not through your low back. Sometimes that's what causes a bit of an irritation with people when they do this, is they're trying to lift too much through their low back and not using their hips. So think about keeping your upper back in contact with the floor as you lift up. And you don't have to push up super, super high. You want this to be kind of a flat line as you lift up to the top. And you want to try to keep your thighs level with each other. So that's where when we do these ones in clinic, we oftentimes look for sort of one hip coming up a little bit earlier than the other. So just take note that you're sort of coming up nice and smooth and equal side to side. And then some simple progressions for this one. So again, you can add the band around your thighs here. Once you've lifted up to the top, I like to do the band sort of combined with a pulse. So you're just pushing into that band once you're at the top of the range of motion. If you don't have a band, you can do this with a weight as well. So you're just holding that weight or whatever weight you have at home on your hips where that axis of the movement is. And then playing around with your body position, you can do these ones with your feet close together and your knees wider apart. Again, this is one of those progressions that sometimes actually helps shift that movement away from your back and more into your hips. So sometimes this can actually help if you're having back pain with that movement as well. And then last but not least for this one, you've got single leg. So obviously more challenging than double leg, and you just want to focus on keeping that pelvis nice and level and making sure you're not sort of tipping one way or the other as you do these. Good. Any questions, Matt? We're good? Okay, so moving on to upper body now. So I tried to pick ones that help to strengthen those muscles that might be getting a little bit weaker in some of our quarantine postures. So when we're slouched forward more, we're sitting on the couch a little bit more, we want to strengthen those muscles through our upper back. So these ones, starting with just T's. So you can do these in standing or sitting. You're just bringing your arms straight back and really squeezing through your shoulder blades here. You want to focus on keeping your shoulders away from your ears. So I'm not shrugging up towards my ears as I do this. And try not to bounce through the movement. Sometimes when people do these, they kind of throw their arms back and they're almost sort of swinging their chest forward and poking their chin out as they do these. So try to do them nice and slow and controlled. And see if you can think about keeping sort of the bottom of your ribs down towards your hips to prevent that chest from sort of flaring out as you come through that movement. Good, so some progressions here. Just holding the band in your hands and taking it kind of as far as you can until it touches your chest. Again, you want to still think about getting that squeeze through your shoulder blades as you come back. So these ones are good for people that are having any of that kind of upper back neck pain due to some changes in your work from home postures. So You can change these into kind of a reverse fly. So you're hinging at your hips to about 45 degrees. You can do this with or without weight. So you can even see when I'm doing these ones here, the weights are a little bit heavy for me because I'm sort of getting into that position where my chest flares out a little bit. So if it is too difficult for you, just keep it without the weights for now. And then our last position, so you can do them face down as well. So that just increases the like the amount of gravity that you're working against. So now you're completely lifting against gravity as you come into that movement. But it's the same sort of idea. You're squeezing through your upper back and lifting up towards the ceiling, trying to squeeze through those shoulder blades. Again, you can go through the full range or kind of pulse at the top of that motion. Okay, another good one for the neck and shoulders is working on the external rotation. So you'll see what that movement looks like here. So kind of elbows at your sides, and you're just bringing your arms as far as you can towards the back of your body. So similar cues with this one. You want to keep the bottom of your ribs kind of down towards, your ribs down towards your hips. You're not flaring your chest out. And rotate your arms as much as you can while you're able to maintain these cues. Some progressions for this one, similar to the last one, so just holding a band in each hand. If you don't have a band with you, you can switch to side lying. Again, now you're working against gravity and you're using a light weight. So I kind of switched to the wine bottle here for a little bit lighter weight. And you can pulse at the end range of that position as well. So these ones are good for people that are having any of that neck and shoulder pain from sort of these changes in work from home positions. And now to the plank. So this is a really popular one for those home workouts. So you can start with doing them from your knees, similar to the way you would do a push-up, or from your knees still, but on your elbows. So you just want to think about keeping that straight line sort of from your neck all the way down to the end of your plank, whatever position you choose to do that in. Trying to keep your glutes, your core, and your quads nice and active as you do this. So a lot of people sometimes just think about like they're almost just balancing on their arms, but the more active you can make the rest of your body, the easier this will feel. So another way to sort of cue that is to slightly externally rotate your arms. So if you're in that plank position now, you want to think about rotating your pinkies out to the side a little bit. It just helps to activate more of the muscles in your back, which will make it feel a little bit easier to do. Again, you can do them from straight arms or elbows. Doesn't matter too much to me. If you do have any aches and pains in your wrist, then doing them from your elbows is better because you're taking that load away from going straight through your wrist. So lots of progressions that you can do with the plank. Coming from your knees up to your feet in itself is a progression. What I like to call army plank, so kind of switching between that elbow to straight arm. Plank jacks would be more of your high impact exercise, so jumping out to the side. Mountain climbers would also be a bit of a high impact exercise, and then shoulder taps. So again, with these ones, super common, but you only want to switch really to these progressions when you're confident in your ability to keep that straight line in your plank as you go through the movements. Okay. Next up, we have bird dog. So these ones are going to be kind of in a crawling position. You want to really focus on keeping this nice and stable. So that line from kind of your neck down to your tailbone. So you're going to lift your opposite arm and leg out and back. But you want to think about being able to sort of balance something on your low back. So oftentimes in clinic, we'll kind of put like a Kleenex box or something on the person's low back. And you want to think about being able to keep that Kleenex box where it is as you lift your leg. So don't think about trying to sort of move your arm and leg up as high as they can, but think more about keeping that low back area nice and stable as you do this. Again, kind of a cue for that one that you can think about is that keeping your lower ribs closer to your hips and keeping your shoulders away from your ears. You don't need to kind of shrug up into that movement as you lift your arms. You're trying to keep this whole sort of trunk of your body nice and sturdy. So if you have a band at home, I like to do this one with just holding it under my hand and then having it tied to my foot. So that adds that extra load onto your leg coming backwards. Again, only doing that if you're able to keep that steady, sturdy trunk coming back into that movement. An alternative, if you don't have a band and have a weight, you can switch and put that weight in your hand and then you're lifting up with the load that way. So again, these are harder than they look. I had to switch down to the wine bottle here.
That's my type of resistance training right there.
Again, just simple modification or progression, pulsing at the end range. So again, this is one that's harder than it looks. Trying to hold everything at that end range while keeping this nice and sturdy is quite challenging. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying like you're able to get a really difficult, challenging workout in without doing a ton of that high impact stuff. So if you're finding that your body's getting sore and you're getting these aches and pains from doing all that high impact, lots of jumping workout style, try some of this stuff that's super low impact. It's super simple, but it's very challenging. And these are exercises that we prescribe all the time in clinic to people that have back pain, have neck pain, have those kinds of issues. So it's really helpful to help strengthen your core and get that good base of support. Okay, I think this is the last one, dead bug. So this is another core one that is, again, is harder than it looks. So you're kind of in that opposite position, flipped on your back this time. You want your knees kind of bent up to 90 degrees and your arms straight up in the air. And then again, opposite arm and leg are gonna come out down towards the ground and then back up. So similar to the bird dog, you want to focus on keeping your core, your trunk and your back kind of as stable as you can. So a little bit of a gap between your low back and the floor is okay. You don't need to fully be kind of pushing down into the floor, but you want to keep that gap as small as possible. So only go as low as you can while you're able to maintain that small, narrow gap between you and the floor. If you're finding that sort of as soon as you get to this point where you're sort of halfway into that movement, your back is really arching, then that's as far as you need to go and you can just come right back up to the starting position. Again, try to exhale as you do that movement part of the exercise. So some more progressions for this one. So using a weight here, it's just adding that load into sort of that limb that's moving away from your core. So play around with the weights that you have at home, but make sure that you are maintaining that position in your low back as you go through these. Another way that you can do it without any equipment is by pushing into the knee that is still staying up. So kind of this arm and knee push into each other while the opposites reach down towards the ground. So as soon as you do this one, you should feel your core sort of kick on even more than it was without. So this is one of those ones, again, that's way more challenging than it looks. But it's super low impact. It's really good for people that have back pain or hip pain because it helps to strengthen that really deep, deep core. And if you're finding that even the basic form of this is too challenging, you're not able to keep that stable core and low back, you can always modify it and just move your arm or just move your leg. So it just decreases the amount of load that you're sort of pulling through your core and back. So just moving one limb at a time is perfectly fine and still challenging for your core. Okay, so those are all the exercises that we're going to go through today. So kind of the goal with this is to either show you guys that you can incorporate those into workouts that you're doing already, or you can even pull those exercises together into making sort of your own workout. So if we were to do more of a beginner style, you'd start with a warm up. So like we talked about before, so slow controlled high knees or butt kicks, forward folds or shoulder circles. So just taking your body through the movements that are going to be similar to what you're doing during your workout. And then for the actual workout, something like going through squats, lunges, and glute bridge for 3 sets of 10. A variation of the plank, so like the shoulder taps, just the standing tees where you're squeezing your shoulder blades together, and then the shoulder external rotation for 3 sets of 10, and then 30 seconds of the bird dog, the dead bug, and a high plank hold for 3 sets of 10. And then a cool down here, I typically like to do more of a static stretch for my cool down. And you can stretch out whatever feels tight to you. Again, typically things that you've just worked on during the activity. And then super simple way to sort of translate that into a more advanced workout. So this is something that maybe you would start with the beginner one and try to work towards this. So same style, same types of exercises, but now you're switching to the jump squats, the jump lunges, and a bridge with a band and a pulse in it. Switching up some of the upper body and plank stuff. So mountain climbers, the T's where you're now lying face down, and then a shoulder external rotation with a band. And then adding some pulses to the bird dogs, a dead bug with a weight in your hand, and the plank jack. So it's a very similar style of workout, which very similar muscle groups that are being activated, but it just shows you how you can take sort of like a simple beginner exercise and work up towards that more difficult high impact or higher load activity. Okay, so quick disclaimer for any of this. If you have any pain with these movements, you can send me a message and we can discuss some ways how to modify the movement specifically for you. So like I mentioned before, some of the ones where you actually add the band to it sometimes helps with the pain. So give that a try and see if maybe you're doing the range of motion a little bit too much, or maybe you're compensating and you don't even know it. Sometimes adding a band to it can help narrow that movement down and actually decreases your pain with the movement. So give that a try, but always shoot me a message if you have any questions. And if you haven't done some of these before, these movements will likely cause you to be sore afterwards. So it's the same thing like trying a new workout style. You will likely have some of that muscle soreness, but if you're having any types of new pain, something that feels a little bit more sharp or something that you're not used to, again, shoot us a message if you have any questions, either myself or any other member of the foundation team. So what now? So basically, again, goal of this talk today is to encourage you to get moving. So I'm not here to sort of tell you to stop trying new workout videos and exercises, but I just want you to think a little bit more about your form and the types of exercises that you're doing. So if there is a certain workout video that you want to try, 100% go for it. But if there's something that you're not used to or something that is giving you any type of pain or discomfort, just substitute that movement. So if it is something like a jump squat or like a high impact movement, just substitute in a normal squat or a normal lunge, something that's a little bit lower impact, that you can focus more on your form and still get that same muscle activation. So yeah, when in doubt, just substitute any of these key exercises, something that you're more comfortable with the form and able to do with a little bit more confidence. So that's it for today. Thanks everyone for listening. If you have any questions, I'll put my info up here so you can send me an email. If you're more comfortable using Instagram, you can always DM me there. And then our website here, that's where we'll be posting the saved webinar. So we're going to save this whole talk today and post that on the website. And that's where you can also find the links to book virtual appointments with us. So if you're going through some of these movements and you have kind of some more questions, or you do have some injuries and aches and pains that you want us to look at a little bit further, we'd love to set up a virtual session with you so that we can kind of work through those things in a little bit more detail, a little bit more specific.